All right, let's jump right in. What if I told you that the absolute biggest event on planet Earth, we're talking an event with literally more member nations than the UN, wasn't born in some grand palace, right? It wasn't launched by a powerful politician, definitely wasn't bankrolled by a billionaire, and honestly, it was never even planned as this massive global empire. It all started with just a simple ball, a handful of dreamers, and one incredibly wild idea that football could belong to absolutely everyone. So today, we're unpacking exactly how the FIFA World Cup practically took over the planet. We're going to deconstruct the data, the history, and the psychology behind how a simple tournament leveled up into the ultimate global phenomenon.
It really is a fascinating question, isn't it? I mean, this didn't just become a global obsession by accident. It grew into this worldwide ritual, a collective heartbeat, and, let's be real, a temporary religion for billions of people. From kickabouts on street corners to these massive, roaring stadiums, from crackling radio broadcasts back in the day to every single smartphone in our hands right now, this one wild idea just spread like wildfire. But why? How on earth does a game reach that absolute level of cultural saturation? Well, let's get into it. Section 1. More than a game. And that brings us to our second part, the brave 1930 experiment. So picture this. In the early 1900s, the sport was already super popular in places like Europe and South America, but there wasn't a single stage where the whole world could actually meet up and play. National teams would play friendlies, regional matches, sure, and they'd play in the Olympics, but nothing felt truly universal. Then, in 1904, FIFA is founded with this massive global ambition. But, it took decades to actually pull off. The very first World Cup in 1930, held in Uruguay, was this incredibly brave experiment. European teams literally had to travel for weeks by boat just to get there. It wasn't some giant commercial spectacle yet, but Uruguay winning that first tournament, it gave the whole thing instant meaning. It basically proved right then and there that football could deliver high-stakes global drama.
Okay, moving on to part 3, accelerators of global obsession.
Now, an obsession of this magnitude doesn't just happen on its own. It needs accelerators to really pour gasoline on the fire. First, television arrives, and boom, everything explodes. Images suddenly crossed borders and beamed straight into people's living rooms. You could actually see the tension on a goalie's face. You could read the fear, the courage, all of it. Television turned the World Cup into pure theater. And because it only happens every 4 years, that scarcity made it incredibly precious. It became a global holiday. From there, migration started collapsing emotional distances. Commerce brought in the serious cash to scale up the infrastructure. And today? Well, today, social media has turned the whole thing into a non-stop 24/7 engine. Let's actually break those last 3 down a bit more, because the impact here is just staggering. As people moved across borders for work or safety or whatever reason, they packed their football loyalties right along with them. Suddenly, a fan living in London could feel deeply personally connected to Lagos. A family in New York felt tied to Buenos Aires. It became this massive homecoming event. Meanwhile, commercial money just started pouring in. We're talking bigger stadiums, slicker broadcasts, allowing the entire world to watch the exact same thing in high def at the exact same time. And nations, they started using this massive stage to signal to the world, hey, look at us, we refuse to be ignored. Add the internet into the mix, and now we are dissecting every single referee decision in real time. There is literally no off switch anymore. Every single reaction is visible, and every miracle is immortalized instantly.
Which leads us to part 4, the emotional engine.
So why does this tournament pull in people who don't even like sports? Honestly, it's the absolute do-or-die stakes. Think about club football for a second. Fans had these long, drawn-out seasons, matches every week, and plenty of time to recover if their team messes up. But the World Cup? It compresses an entire emotional universe into just one single month. Every single match feels like a grand final. One bad pass, your dream is over. One unexpected goal, you've just rewritten history. And then the wait for the next chance is a brutal, agonizing 4 years. We humans are just wired for pressure, and the World Cup is pressure in its absolute purest form. It's all about who can survive the immense, crushing weight of the moment. And being in that pressure cooker creates stories so deeply powerful, they end up repeating themselves generation after generation. This is exactly what draws the neutral viewers in. You've got the underdog story, like think back to tiny Iceland shockingly knocking out England. Wild, right? Then you have the heartbreak story, a team falling just inches short, leaving an entire country sitting in stunned silence. There's the redemption story, kind of like Ronaldo back in 2002, coming back from a massive injury to basically carry millions of people on his back. And of course, the rivalry story, where two nations clash and it's about history, memory, and pride. When nations play, it becomes so much bigger than a sport.
And as the tournament grew, its legends grew right alongside it. Every single generation gets its own icons. You had Pele turning his youthful brilliance into this eternal mythology. Maradona, who practically transformed football into poetry. And, a fair bit of controversy. Zidane bringing all that elegance and drama. And then the modern giants, right? Messi, Mbappe, Modric. They're constantly adding fresh chapters to the story. But here's the thing. These aren't just players anymore. They are symbols. They literally become the faces attached to national dreams. They're expected to carry the hopes of millions of people they will never even meet, but who are going to remember their every touch, their every mistake, and every triumph for the rest of their natural lives.
Now, this brings us to a wildly fascinating psychological concept, emotional inherence. There is something so deeply visceral about how the World Cup turns totally ordinary people into die-hard national believers. Suddenly, someone who barely watches sports knows the exact minute their team was knocked out in heartbreaking fashion back in 2006, or exactly how they celebrated when they won in 2010. Fathers are telling sons about legendary old matches. Mothers remember exactly where they were sitting during a crazy milestone. The tournament acts like this giant family memory machine. Every 4 years, it reactivates these intense emotions that never truly went away.
And finally, Part 5, a universal human language. Before we really look at the global impact, we absolutely have to acknowledge the spark that ignites the whole thing: unpredictability. The World Cup basically refuses to obey logic. A massive star player can completely disappear, a total benchwarmer can become a national hero overnight. Literally, a single lucky bounce of the ball can decide the fate of a nation. It's this beautiful reminder that in football, just like in life, the most powerful things are very often the ones we have absolutely no control over. That uncertainty, it keeps people glued to the screen. It keeps hope alive even when reality is screaming that it should be over. Unpredictability is, without a doubt, pure fuel for human emotion.
And, in a deeply divided world where we speak completely different languages, follow different religions, and live under completely different governments and daily realities, the World Cup manages to create this incredibly rare kind of shared experience. Suddenly, you've got people in cafes, in classrooms, in offices, all the way across the globe, and they are all arguing about the exact same referee decision. They're celebrating the same miracle goal, or they're mourning the exact same heartbreaking defeat at the literal exact same second. That sense of worldwide simultaneity, it tells us that even if it's just for a brief moment, the planet can actually still feel connected.
At the heart of all this is just a strange, genuinely beautiful truth. This is one of the very few times humanity willingly gathers around something that isn't war, isn't politics, and isn't some global disaster. For 1 month, we just focus on skill, on pride, and on sheer possibility. Excitement is universal. Suspense is universal. Defeat is universal. The World Cup has completely transcended mere entertainment. It's become part of our shared emotional archive. It gives the world a story, every 4 years, that absolutely everyone can understand. It truly is a language the world speaks with its heart.
It marks time in our lives, doesn't it? 4 years is long enough for kids to grow up, for heroes to fade away, and for entirely new legends to step into the spotlight. Each edition is a brand new chapter in a story that never actually ends. So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. What will your memory be when the world stops for 90 minutes again? Where are you going to be? And who will you be watching it with? Take a second to think about your own emotional inheritance. Look, if unpacking the anatomy of the World Cup made you see the game a little differently today, then definitely stick around. Deconstructing these massive, fascinating topics is exactly what we do here. Make sure you hit subscribe and join us for the next explainer, because I promise you the next topic might just be even bigger than this one.